Today, the Senate made clear that the purpose of the Patriot Act is to spy on Americans. No warrants or due process necessary. This is a quote from Dayton Young. Any lawmaker who votes to reauthorize the Patriot Act is voting against our constitutionally protected freedoms, and there's nothing patriotic about that. And quote, I would take it further. I would say the only thing that is treasonous. So in this video, I want to cover this breaking news. This is very telling out of the Senate. There was an amendment to this USA Freedom Act that would make it so that the FBI and the FISA courts could not get at individuals' web browsing history, like what websites you go to, what videos you're watching on YouTube, without a warrant. That's what this amendment was pushing for. Now, as it says here, the government just got even more power to spy on your internet habits as millions remain quarantined at home. So here's kind of the scoreboard at the end of the vote. 59 yay votes to 37 nay votes. Out of the 100 senators, 4 people did not show up. So there were 4 no-shows that any of them could have tipped the scales. And I'm also extremely skeptical here. I think both sides are working together, and they're all sellouts, and they're liars. So I wouldn't put it past them to rig it so that they could get a lot of people looking like they were making the right vote. But ultimately, everybody knew that it wasn't going to get the 60 it needed. This needed 60 to pass, and it got 59. The Senate couldn't even get their butts to vote to stop the FBI and FISA court from looking at people's web browsing histories without a warrant. Spying on everybody's internet habits has become a lot easier. So we will cover each of the people who voted. And again, just because they voted yay or were no-shows doesn't mean that they're on the right side of this. They could all be colluding. There could be enough of them colluding that they can make it look like, oh, there's a lot of people trying to fight for your privacy to some minuscule extent. Yet this garbage legislation keeps getting passed. Okay, so we're going to break this down in a lot of detail here. But let's start with this Vice article. It's pretty good. So they're trying to reauthorize the Patriot Act, which, like Evan Greer says here, should be repealed in its entirety, set on fire, and buried in the ground. That's the overarching problem here. The overarching problem here is that we have a lot of people in Congress who want you to be spied on. They want everybody to be surveilled, tracked, traced, and databased. And a lot of people are righteously upset about the HR 666 Trace Act, or HR 6666, excuse me, Trace Act. These same people should be upset about the USA Patriot Act and the USA Freedom Act. And this amendment not passing is extremely telling. So again, this is happening during the COVID-19 shutdown, when these tyrants think they have the right to stop everybody from living their lives, and they think they have the right to stop people from breathing freely by pushing these masks. This isn't right, folks. The Patriot Act is still in effect. This is a great quote. Today, the Senate made clear that the purpose of the Patriot Act is to spy on Americans. No warrants or due process necessary. Any lawmaker who votes to reauthorize the Patriot Act is voting against our constitutionally protected freedoms, and there's nothing patriotic about that. And that was from Dayton Young, director of Fight for the Future. And that's what we need to be doing right now. We need to be fighting for the future. So again, how much of this is a stage and how much of this is there actually being a conflict here? 59 people wanting to limit the FBI's crazy surveillance policies and the NSA's crazy surveillance policies, and 37 tyrants who want to conspire to deprive us against our rights. And every time they vote nay on one of these good bills or yay on one of the bad bills, they are conspiring against our rights if anybody else joins them, even if the motion doesn't pass or the bill doesn't become law. And again, this amendment is kind of a side issue. It's extremely telling that they can't even agree to this. But the real issue here is the underlying Patriot Act and the USA Freedom Act. So let's move on. I just want to give a quick, brief summary here about the Patriot Act. This came out October 26th, 2001. I forgot how many pages it was. It was a long bill. If you didn't know, USA Patriot is actually an acronym for Uniting and Strengthening America by Providing Appropriate Tools Required to Intercept and Obstruct Terrorism Act of 2001. So let me ask you, who were the terrorists back in 2001? And who are the terrorists now? So back in 2001, the boogeyman was the radical Islamic terrorist. And now the media is telling people that the boogeyman is the homegrown domestic terrorist who got radicalized on the internet, and that they need to go after conspiracy theorists because they are prone to violence. There are FBI documents that say that this is internally how the law enforcement and the intelligence agencies view people who look at the government skeptically. Radical Islamic terrorists, right? That's what the media was pushing. I don't think that that was ever a real threat. I don't think that was ever anything to go to war against. I don't think that was ever anything to deprive hundreds of millions of people, billions of people actually, because it's a global surveillance network. But they're depriving billions of people of their rights, the right to privacy. These people want to play God and look over everything everybody does. It's collective punishment. You know, they say some people out there are doing some bad things, so we're going to punish everybody. Nobody gets to live in a world of privacy. Collective punishment is a war crime, as far as I'm concerned. I don't want to have my rights stripped because somebody else does something the government doesn't like. And we all have a lot of doubts about World Trade Center 7, by the way, government. Maybe you guys can tell us why NIST isn't releasing the Building 7 data, and their excuse is that it's a threat to public safety.
Fires expanded long support beams, causing connections and floors to fail.
So you look at the floors failing here, and eventually this column 79 is going to buckle, it fails, and then the entire vertical progression takes place.
New York City, 2001. No tall building had ever collapsed primarily due to fire. The buckled column caused additional collapsed floors and falling debris that removed support from adjacent interior columns. A chain reaction then caused other interior columns to fail in quick succession. The outside shell of the building fell. The NIST team found no evidence that explosives were involved in the collapse.
They're saying they can prove scientifically with their computer model that the building fell due to progressive collapse due to office fire from the falling other towers. But of course, they don't release the source code to the public. They refuse to do that. They say that would jeopardize public safety, quote unquote. How ridiculous is that? Here's a clip from a press conference. I think it's funny.
This investigation for World Trade Center 7 took about 3 years. That seems a lot longer than you may have thought when you started it. I'm just curious if you could explain why it took so long.
When we started this investigation in 2002, I think we underestimated the amount of effort that would be required to solve the problem, the questions that were raised. Very quickly we found that the collapse analysis of the towers were incredibly complex undertakings. Never before had the complexity of that analysis been done, where we actually were trying to simulate the airplane impact into the buildings, followed by the fire dynamics and the growth of the spread of the fires, followed by the thermal analysis, and then followed by actually what happened to the structure as it initiated collapse. So at that point, we put the World Trade Center 7 investigation on hold until we could get that finished. And then we restarted this in the September of 2005. And of course, we thought, given the fact we had experience with the towers, that, well, we might be able to do things much quicker and much faster. And of course, as you have heard, there was obviously no plane that hit this building. There was some structural damage, but there was no thousands of gallons of jet fuel spread to simultaneously ignite multiple floors in this building. So it was a question was, why really did this building come down? And as we dug into it more carefully, we first looked at whether the columns may have had fuel because of the lot of diesel fuel that was stored in the building, and we quickly, based on some calculations, figured out the fires would have had to have been there for a very long time from the diesel fuel to actually bring this building down. And therefore, we then had to look further. And as we dug into it, we figured out that there was a phenomenon that we had not previously recognized in current practice, the issue of thermal expansion, which actually could cause this particular problem to happen. But that insight, we didn't have that insight till early last year, early part of 2007. And after that, it was so-called smooth sailing, but we had these horrendous computer programs which took us 6 to 8 months to complete a single run. So getting those programs correct, making sure they're working correctly, making sure the results are being interpreted correctly, took us a long time. And we wanted to make sure we got this right than to actually rush and provide a solution to the public which was not right. And of course, 3 years is not an unusual length of time for failure investigations. Aircraft accident investigations take 2 or 3 years. Building investigations of this complexity will take 2 or 3 years. So it's not unusual.
Okay. We're going to take a question now from the web. Gail Porter will read the question.
Yes, hi. This is a question from Theron Shoa from Real News Radio, and he's asking, are you contending that fire caused all structural load-bearing beams to collapse at the exact same second and caused the building to fall in 8 seconds?
I have sent numerous letters to them, and I will continue to, as has Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. But yeah, look into that if you haven't heard of it. But yeah, this is the Patriot Act. Then we also have the USA Freedom Act. USA Freedom, likewise, is an acronym for Uniting and Strengthening America by fulfilling rights and ensuring effective discipline over monitoring. So just write out proving that they're monitoring everybody. Oh, but we need to have effective discipline. So basically it imposes some limits on the bulk collection of telecommunication data by American intelligence agencies such as the NSA and the FBI. And then the Patriot Act is the overarching rights trampling, garbage, treasonous, East German to the 10th power legislation that they had in the works. We all know they had this ready to go. I mean, it was like a month later they passed this thing. Signed into law on October the 26th. So this is interesting. This is one of the sponsors. He said, I guess in one of his speeches before the vote, he said this amendment was necessary to keep the government from intruding into the most sensitive information of internet users in the U.S. He says, if you want to see an American's search history, then you better go to a judge and get a warrant. Now, this one is concerning. There's another amendment drafted by Mitch McConnell that would expressively allow the collection of web search and browsing data into the Patriot Act, where they don't even have to show probable cause to acquire it. Now, again, I'm not an expert on the FISA courts. I'm not an expert on what exactly NSA is collecting. I don't think very many people actually know. This is all crazy. So let's look at the amendment now. Again, this died yesterday. They got 59 out of the 60 needed. It's an amendment onto this act here, H.R. 6172, which basically reauthorizes the USA Freedom Act, which is kind of the Patriot Act in a sense. Here are the votes for USA Freedom Reauthorization Act. So this huge spy surveillance program actually already passed the House. It passed the House, I guess, on March the 11th. So that was like a month ago. And we have all the traitors here. These are all the yays, 278 yays. Now, just because people voted nay on it doesn't mean that they're not really happy that it passed. if that makes sense. Like, if you know that enough people are going to vote on it that it goes through, then maybe you save face with your constituents and vote no. So I'm not going to say that the people who voted no are heroic or anything, because they could be in on this whole thing, just playing their part. Controlled opposition. But these people who voted yay on the USA Freedom Reauthorization Act are definitely traitors in my book. So I want to go through all of these. Democrats are non-italic, Republicans are italic, and independents are underlined, but they're rare. So I also have in my notes here what state each person's from. So we have Adams out of North Carolina, Democrat. Aderholt out of Alabama, Republican. Aguilar out of California, Democrat. Allen out of Georgia, Republican. All right, so I'm seeing now that that's a bad idea. I can't really list them all out. There's way too many of them. There are 278 people who voted yay on this heinous legislation. Keep in mind, the 136 people who made the right decision and voted nay only make up 31% of the 435 total House members. And it's about the same for each party. Actually, the Democrats respect our privacy rights more here. 32.5% of Democrats did the right thing. 30.4% of Republicans did the right thing. But still, I mean, the overwhelming majority of the representatives reauthorized USA Freedom Patriot Act. I really wish I had time and you guys had the patience to list out all these people. But just let me put it this way. Your representative probably, as in around 70% of the time, did the wrong thing in regards to the USA Freedom Reauthorization Act, H.R. 6172. So you might want to find your person on here and see which way they voted. Because if they voted yay, they might very well hate your guts and want to surveil you. Remember who they're calling terrorists now in the media. So let's look at the amendment itself now. Basically right here, you can see this is the amendment we're talking about, 1583, and then afterwards it goes to 1584. So this is the section right here. Basically they're saying, take this bill, H.R. 6172, and that is amending FISA Act of 1978. That's another thing. Remember, a lot of this stuff goes way back. Basically what it does is it adds this part right here. So it says, in addition to not being able to get the cell or GPS location data, you're also not allowed to get website browsing information or internet search history information. So basically, anyone who voted nay on this says that they love the ambiguity that's in the language that allows the NSA and the FBI to just trample all over our rights. They're like, no, don't put in that hard stop. We like that they're collecting website browsing information. We like that they're collecting internet search history information. Apparently, what's his name? Mitch McConnell has a amendment in here that's the exact opposite of this one. It explicitly allows them to collect this information without even having probable cause. That's the problem with these illegal, warrantless data grabs that the FBI loves to use. I am not a fan of the FBI. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to call in a crime to the FBI, like deprivation of rights or conspiracy against rights. They don't care. They're not about justice. They're not about investigating anything except for you and me. And that's what you find when you call them up. They start grilling you. They're like, what's your social? What's your address? It's crazy. So everybody who voted nay on this amendment, I consider traitors. I do consider this a side issue a bit because this whole premise that they should be able to do data grabs without warrants should be rejected. And that is the Patriot Act and the USA Freedom Act should just be thrown out, and everybody involved in it and who have been conspiring against our rights and depriving us of our Fourth Amendment right to privacy, all of those people need to go to jail. I don't care if they were just following orders or following unjust laws. They ought to be following the Bill of Rights. So these are all the traitors who voted nay on this amendment that explicitly said, no FBI, you can't just request people's web search history for no reason, or their web browsing history. So these are the 37 people. I want to read them out real quick. Barrasso, Blackburn, Blunt, Boozman, Burr, Capito, Carper, Casey, Collins, Hornian, Feinstein, Fisher, Graham, Hassan, Hyde, Smith, Inhofe, Johnson, Jones, Kane, Lankford, Manchin, McConnell, Perdue, Portman, Roberts, Romney, Rubio, Shaheen, Shelby, Thune, Tillis, Toomey, Warner, Whitehouse, Wicker, and Young. And then these people are just as bad because by not voting, they prevented it from getting to 60 votes. And like I said, I think this is all just a play and that a lot of them are in on it. And so some of them can get away with voting yay on it and looking like the good guys because they know it's not going to pass. It's like WWF. So not voting, Alexander, Murray, Sanders, and Sass. So Sanders betrays. No surprise there. So that amendment failed, and it's very telling. It shows, like the Vice article says, I have to give them credit. Let's read that again. This is a quote from Dayton Young. Today, the Senate made clear that the purpose of the Patriot Act is to spy on Americans. No warrants or due process necessary. Any lawmaker who votes to reauthorize the Patriot Act is voting against our constitutionally protected freedoms, and there's nothing patriotic about that. End quote. I would take it further. I would say the only thing that is treasonous. So this is disgusting. You see, our representatives actually working on this BS right now while they have the whole country locked down? Well, millions of people are having their rights deprived. This is what they're working on. Both the USA Patriot Act, the USA Freedom Act, all these amendments, the FISA courts, the Utah Data Center as pictured here. This is where they're storing so much data. And they're probably not, I'm sure they're not telling us everything they're collecting. Remember, I don't know if you guys heard, Facebook was launched the same day LifeLog, a DARPA project to collect a profile, assemble a profile by collecting data on every single person. They phased that out on the same day Facebook popped up on the scene. And by it being a private corporation, it gives them a lot of additional powers. Like they can censor people in addition to collect all of your data. It's crazy. And then they can also make a bunch of money off of it. So the insiders who know that the media is going to be pumping Facebook for the next few decades to get everybody onto the controlled platform, if you know that they're going to sell a ton of advertisement, which funds their censorship developments in terms of AI, thought police, and shadow banning technology. But if you're an early adopter and you know where that stock's going, you know that trajectory is going way, way up, you can make a lot of money off of tyranny. You can make a lot of money off war, a lot of money off of concentration camps, population surveillance, population control. Okay, so this was the Senate voting on the amendment. So the key thing here are the people who voted nay. So I want to focus on them. I also want to end with this story here, which I don't have time to make into a full video since there's so much news, but this kind of goes along. These are the states taking it even further than what the federal government does. So these are the California police. They've been illegally sharing license plate reader data. So they're basically just sharing everybody's location data with people who aren't legally allowed to have it. And I'm not agreeing with the laws. I think they're way too loose on what the government's allowed to collect. We live in East Germany to the 10th power. 320 million images, LA Police Department. So they're storing it in a department database, could be used to track people's movement. Remember, New Orleans has been busted a couple of times where they get their systems hacked with ransomware, which is a huge privacy issue because that means they just had their way with the system. So that data was probably compromised, leaked on the dark web or something. Wow, the LAPD also adds other sensitive information to that database, sometimes tagging the photos with criminal records, names, addresses, and dates of birth. So it's the same thing they always do. They're like, oh, well, we have these missing children cases, so we need to track all the vehicles. So collective punishment, mass abuse of power, all in the guise, there's a couple bad apples, everyone has to be collectively punished. I don't stand for collective punishment. I don't believe in kings. I don't believe in tyrants having power. So please stand up against the Patriot Act, fight against the Patriot Act and the USA Freedom Acts and all these tyrants who want to steal our freedoms with these bills and what's that other one, HR 6666, the Trace Act. That just takes this to a whole new level. So thanks everyone for tuning in. I really appreciate each of you watching this, and I hope you all have a great day.